Welcome. In this session we're going to be using percents to solve problems. We're on section 6.3 in our textbook. There are two objectives in this section. The first one is to just translate percent problems into equations. So the method that we're going to use in this section is equations. In order to understand it, you need to know a little bit about the language of mathematics. The word of means to multiply. The word is translates into an equal sign. The what is a variable. And in this section, the number with the percent sign is going to be written as a decimal. When you're calculating with percents, you always use them in their decimal form when there's an equation. First, let's take a look at a basic percent. Let's say 50% of 8 is what? Well, half of 8 is 4. So 50% of 8 is 4. That's called the basic percent equation. I have an of and I have an is. I have three numbers. The number after the word of is called the base. The number with the percent sign is called the percent. And the number with after the is, kind of the answer, is the amount. So the basic percent equation looks like this. The percent of means times the base, is means equals, and that's the amount. The percent times the base always equals the amount. It's a little equation that we're going to be using. So let's take a look at a couple problems here from the first objective. We just want to translate into an equation. We don't want to solve anything. So the question is, what percent of 80 is 25? We're looking for the P for the percent. Of means times. I'm going to use a dot for multiply. Is means equals. So we translate right off of the words and the numbers. What percent? P. Of means times. 80. Is means equals 25. There's a little equation that we can use to find the answer. Our second question says 25%. We'll always use the decimal equivalent of the percent when you're working with an equation like this. Remember, of means times. The number after the of is always the base, so we'll use the letter B. You can just use the X variable all the time if you want. If you want to use P for percent and B for base and A for amount, it can kind of help you keep straight what we're trying to find. And of course, is means equals. So I'm going to write 0.25, that's my percent. Of means times. I'm looking for the base. Is means equals, and 4. So you translate right off of the words into the numbers and the symbols. The second objective here is to actually solve some problems using an equation. An equation is a math problem that we can solve by sort of undoing, if you remember the equations that we did with our review. We're on page 354 now. They're showing you several examples of how you would solve. Their examples are very clear and well done. They label the amount and the base for each one. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. Our example. Also notice this is the required work when you're using an equation to solve a percent problem. We'll talk about this last statement here in a minute. 20% of what is 45? First thing I want to ask myself is, what am I trying to find? Remember, the number after the of is always the base. So I'm trying to find 20% of some number is 45. That means I'm taking part of something, and the answer to that is 45. I'm taking a percent of a base and it equals an amount or an answer. Excuse me. Step number 1, translate it into an equation, remembering that the percent is written as a decimal. So I'm going to write 0.20, that's the decimal equivalent of 20%. Of means times, you can use an X or a dot. Of what? We're trying to find the base. Is equals 45. There's my equation. Then I'm going to solve the equation by dividing something. I'm trying to find the B, the base. Notice something's multiplied by it. To find what it is when something's multiplied, we just divide whatever that is off. We're going to divide the 0.20 off of both sides. When I take 0.20 times B and divide off the 0.20, it just becomes 1. Something divided by itself makes a 1. So I have 1B. And then with my calculator, I could take 45 divided by 0.2, and I'm going to get 225. So I'm taking part of 225. The answer is 45. You want to stop and think about whether or not the answer that you get actually makes sense. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm taking part of something, 20%. So 20%, is that half? No, that's less than half, isn't it? So I'm taking less than half of 225, and the answer is 45. That seems about right, you know. Half of 225 would be what, 112 or something like that? I'm actually taking less than a quarter of it, aren't I? So thinking about, remember that little number line for the size of things? 0 to 100%. 100% is the whole thing. So if I've got 225 things and I'm taking half of them, that'd be 112 point something. I'm down here at 20%. That's about right, isn't it? So 45 is a small part of 225. That's one way that you can kind of think about how these work. I'm going to clear that off so that you'll have just the basic writing here to look at. Down at the bottom, there's a big warning. One of the most important objectives of this course is to write things into equation form and use an equation to solve. This is an equation up here. It makes two things equal. We've solved it by showing our dividing on both sides of that equation. You need to write your work out like that and like they're showing in the textbook. If you just write a dividing problem, 45 divided by 0.2, yeah, you're getting the correct answer, but you're just writing an arithmetic problem. A main course of this is a main objective of this course is to write a simple equation and solve them using algebra. If you don't do that, you're going to end up missing points on our next test. So please do try to practice using that equation method.